The Galactic Academy of Higher Learning wasn't just another educational institution floating among the stars. It was the embodiment of a dream that took 3 centuries to realize. Founded in the year 2784, it emerged from the ashes of the Great Species War, when 7 major civilizations finally understood that their differences could be their greatest strength. The idea first sparked in the mind of Dr. Elena Rodriguez-Chen, a human xenoanthropologist who had spent decades studying various species' learning methods. She had witnessed how the crystalline Lemurians absorbed knowledge through light frequencies, how the gaseous nebulans shared information through carefully controlled atmospheric vibrations, and how the silicon-based Petroxians learned through direct neural interfaces with their mineral databases. Education isn't just about transferring information, she wrote in her groundbreaking thesis. It's about creating an environment where different species can learn from each other's unique perspectives and abilities. The school took shape in the neutral space of the Andromeda Milky Way corridor, constructed within a massive Stanford torus that could accommodate multiple atmospheric zones and gravity levels. The engineering feat alone took 50 years, with contributions from 12 different species, each adding their unique technological expertise to create something unprecedented. The station's core, known as the Unity Hub, featured revolutionary adaptive environments that could shift to meet the needs of any species. Classroom walls could transform from solid matter to energy fields, temperature zones could range from absolute zero to plasma hot, and gravity could be manipulated down to the molecular level. This technological marvel allowed beings from gas giants to walk alongside creatures from super-Earth planets, each comfortable in their own environmental bubble while still able to interact with others. But perhaps the most revolutionary aspect was the curriculum itself. Unlike traditional schools that focused on standardized learning, the Galactic Academy embraced what they called perspective education. Students weren't just taught facts and figures, they were encouraged to understand how different species perceived and processed the same information. A simple concept like time could be explored through the lens of a short-lived ephemeral being who experienced their entire life in what humans would consider days, or through the eyes of a Sequoia-inspired species that lived for millennia. When the Academy opened its doors in 2784, it welcomed its first class of 500 students from 50 different species. Among them were humans from Earth, crystalline beings from the Orion system, energy-based life forms from the galactic core, and even a few silicon-based intelligences from the Outer Rim. Each brought their own unique way of thinking, learning, and existing to create what would become known as the most diverse learning environment in known space. The admission process was rigorously fair, based not on species or origin, but on potential and the ability to contribute to the interspecies dialogue. The Academy's motto, "Knowledge knows no form," became a rallying cry for educational reform across the galaxy. It represented a fundamental shift in how different species viewed education and each other. For the first time in galactic history, a Deathworlder could study quantum mechanics alongside a being of pure energy, while a silicon-based life form could debate philosophy with a collective consciousness of microscopic organisms. The challenges were enormous, but so were the possibilities. When Marcus Chen stepped into the Academy's Unity Hub for the first time, he knew he was different. Not just because he was human, there were plenty of humans at the Academy, but because he was from Earth itself, a planet still classified as a death world by galactic standards. Earth's high gravity, volatile weather, and complex ecosystem had shaped humans into what many species considered terrifying survival machines. Marcus had grown up in the highlands of New Zealand, where the gravity was slightly stronger than Earth's average. His muscles, dense bones, and rapid reflexes, normal by Earth standards, made him extraordinarily powerful in the Academy's standard gravity settings. He could accidentally crush delicate equipment designed for lighter gravity species, and his quick movements sometimes startled his more fragile classmates. The Academy had protocols for such situations, of course. All Deathworlders were required to wear gravity compensators and movement dampeners in common areas. But these were just technical solutions to a deeper social challenge. How do you help beings evolved for survival on a harsh world integrate with species that evolved in more forgiving environments? Marcus found his answer in unexpected places. His first friend was a luminescent, a being of pure light who could only communicate through carefully modulated photon emissions. They bonded over their mutual interest in xenobiology, with Marcus's physical resilience complementing the luminescent's ability to perceive microscopic cellular changes. Together, they could conduct experiments that neither could manage alone. But it was in physical education class where the true challenges and opportunities became apparent. The Academy's gym was a marvel of engineering, with sections that could simulate everything from zero gravity to the crush depth of gas giant planets. Each species had their own training regimens, designed to maintain their unique physiological needs. The turning point came during a joint exercise session. Several species had gathered to learn about different forms of movement and physical adaptation. Marcus, despite his dampeners, still moved with a grace and power that made some of his classmates nervous. A young Aerolith, a being evolved for life in the upper atmosphere of a gas giant, actually became temporarily transparent with fear when Marcus demonstrated a simple Earth-standard jumping jack. But then something remarkable happened. A Petroxian student, made of living crystal, asked Marcus to explain how his muscles worked. Soon, a small crowd gathered as Marcus carefully demonstrated human biomechanics. The fear began to turn to fascination as different species shared their own forms of movement. The Aeroliths showed how they could ride solar winds. The Petroxians demonstrated their ability to restructure their crystalline forms, and a collective of microscopic organisms displayed their synchronized swimming patterns. The day that changed everything started like any other at the Galactic Academy. The third period physical education class gathered in the adaptive gymnasium, with students from 12 different species preparing for their comparative locomotion lesson. The instructor, a multiform shapeshifter named Professor Flux, had planned a session on different species approaches to rapid acceleration and deceleration. Marcus arrived wearing his standard gravity compensators, but today something was different. The Academy's engineering team had installed a new environmental control system, and the calibration was slightly off. As Marcus entered the gym, his compensators flickered for just a moment, but that moment was enough to demonstrate his full Deathworlder capabilities. When the compensators glitched, Marcus instinctively caught his balance by executing what would have been a simple hop on Earth. In the gym's standard gravity, however, that small movement launched him nearly 3 meters into the air. He landed with perfect control, his Deathworlder reflexes allowing him to absorb the impact without a sound. But the damage was done. The other students had seen what he was capable of. The Aerolith students immediately floated to the ceiling, their natural defense mechanism kicking in. The crystalline Petroxians vibrated at their resonant frequency, their species equivalent of nervous trembling. Even the usually unflappable energy beings pulsed with agitation, their normally steady auras flickering with distress patterns. Professor Flux, sensing the tension, attempted to turn the incident into a teaching moment. Class, what we've just witnessed is a perfect example of evolutionary adaptation. The same gravitational forces that shaped Marcus's species into capable survivors also gave them extraordinary control over their movements. This is neither good nor bad, it simply is. But the professor's words did little to calm the class. A young nebuloid student, whose gaseous form was usually a calm blue, had turned a worried green. But Professor, it whispered through atmospheric vibrations. The calculations indicate that with that level of strength and speed, a Deathworlder could help save your life in an emergency, Marcus interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. Could help evacuate your people if your atmospheric containment fails. Could carry sensitive equipment through high-gravity zones where other species would be crushed. He paused, then added softly, being strong doesn't make someone dangerous. It's how they choose to use that strength that matters. The gym fell silent as his words sank in. Even the Aeroliths descended slightly from their ceiling refuge, their transparent forms showing hints of curiosity mixing with their fear. In the days following the gym incident, something unexpected began to happen. Rather than avoiding Marcus, some of his classmates started seeking him out. Not out of fear, but curiosity. It began with Clara, a young Petrocian whose crystalline form sparkled with intellectual curiosity. Your musculature? Clara chimed, her crystal structure vibrating with interest. It responds to neural signals much faster than our databases suggested possible. How do you maintain such precise control? The question was asked during lunch period in the Unity Hub, where students from all species gathered to share meals and conversation. Marcus smiled, carefully adjusting his movement dampeners to demonstrate. "It's all about feedback loops," he explained, slowly flexing his arms so Clara could observe. "Every movement generates data that our nervous system processes and adjusts in real time. It's not unlike how your crystalline matrix reconfigures itself, just on a biological rather than mineral basis." The conversation attracted others. A cluster of nebuloids drifted closer, their gaseous forms swirling with interest. An energy being named Spark manifested nearby, its consciousness field humming with curiosity. Even some of the Aeroliths, still maintaining a safe distance, oriented their sensory arrays toward the discussion. Professor Flux, observing from nearby, recognized a teaching opportunity. The next day's physical education class was restructured into what they called adaptive understanding sessions. Students from different species were paired together to learn about each other's physical capabilities and limitations. Marcus worked with a young nebuloid named Whisper, teaching them about human joint articulation while learning how nebuloids could control their molecular density. The Petroxians demonstrated their ability to refract energy through their bodies, while the Aeroliths showed how they could ride electromagnetic fields. The fear began to transform into understanding, and understanding led to innovation. The class started developing new hybrid exercise routines that incorporated the strengths of multiple species. Marcus's Deathworlder abilities, once a source of anxiety, became an asset in designing safety protocols and spotting techniques for mixed-species activities. As the academic year progressed, the Galactic Academy's physical education class became known throughout the station as a model of interspecies cooperation. The story of how a Deathworlder's presence had transformed from a source of fear into a catalyst for innovation spread through the academic community. The class's final project was a demonstration of what they called symphonic movement, a coordinated display where each species' unique physical capabilities complemented the others. Marcus's powerful, controlled movements provided an anchor point for the more fluid species. The Aeroliths created atmospheric currents that the nebuloids could shape into visible patterns. The Petroxians refracted light from the energy beings, creating spectacular displays that the Luminescents could modulate into communication arrays. During the demonstration, Marcus noticed something profound. The same students who had once fled from his presence were now synchronized with his movements, using his strength as a foundation for their own expressions. The fear had been replaced by trust, and more importantly, by understanding. Dr. Rodriguez-Chen, now in her final years as the Academy's director, attended the demonstration. In her closing remarks, she noted, "This is exactly what we dreamed of when we founded this institution. Not just species coexisting, but truly learning from each other's differences. Today, we saw how what might be perceived as disadvantages or dangers can become advantages when viewed through the lens of cooperation." The success of the physical education class led to the development of new curriculum standards across the Academy. The term Deathworlder began to lose its fearful connotations, becoming instead a neutral descriptor of evolutionary origin. Other classes began incorporating physical differences into their teaching methods, recognizing that diverse capabilities could enhance learning across all disciplines. Marcus's final paper for the class, titled Strength in Diversity, A Deathworlder's Perspective on Interspecies Physical Education, became required reading for future students. In it, he wrote, "The true measure of strength isn't in how much power we possess, but in how we use that power to lift others up. In learning to work with species so different from myself, I discovered that what makes us unique isn't what divides us. It's what makes us stronger together." As the academic year drew to a close, the Unity Hub hosted a celebration where students from all species gathered without environmental barriers. Marcus stood among his classmates, his movement dampeners now adjusted to settings he had helped design, watching as beings of all forms interacted with newfound comfort and understanding. The fear that had once filled the gym had been transformed into something else entirely. Hope for a future where differences were not just tolerated, but celebrated as essential components of galactic society.